Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Ontario Aquaculture Research Centre. If you're looking to learn more about aquaculture, you're in the right place.
Hi guys, and welcome back to our channel. Today I'm super excited to introduce Lawrence Gunther, President of Bluefish Canada, host of the Bluefish Radio show, and editor of the Bluefish News. Today, Lawrence is here to talk about his charity, Bluefish Canada, how it promotes a One Health relationship with nature through catch and release fishing, and how to practice sustainable and humane harvest of wild fish stocks. So, Lawrence, can you tell us more, and why was it important for you to start this charity?
There's a lot of people who love fishing, right? I mean, anywhere from 3.5 to 6 million Canadians. And I think there hasn't been too many Canadians that have grown up without trying their hand at fishing. And then if you look at what's available on the internet and magazines and publications and promotions of, various technologies, there's no end of resources in terms of how to catch fish, how to catch many fish, how to catch big fish. What we want to do is make sure that that sort of responsible, ethical side of angling is taught as well. So, like you said, if you're going to do catch and release, how do you make sure those fish are going back healthy and you're doing it the right way? And if you're going to harvest, which ones should you be harvesting and how to make sure that's sustainable? So those are our goals. The name Bluefish Canada, it's about water, it's about fish, and it's about fishing.
Awesome. I mean, do you kind of want to talk a little bit about yourself before we get into it? I mean, you've done some incredible things and had some great experiences. I just, kind of before we get into sustainable food and why it's important, so everyone kind of knows a little bit about you.
Yeah, well, I've been registered blind since the age of 8. I lost my central vision, so I still managed to keep up with my brothers pretty good on the farm. We had a pond. We did a lot of outdoor stuff. My dad was really good at introducing us at a young age to outdoor stuff and fishing. I was the one who loved the fishing the most, and I think it's because, when we go fishing, we're all sort of fishing blind, right? It's, what's going on beneath the surface is a visualization process. And I lived my whole life by visualizing. And then I thought I should be teaching this to other people, this skill, and not just how to catch fish. And I do a lot of that. I have a website called feelthebite.ca, and I pass on all my tips about feeling for the bite. But I wanted to go and teach people how to visualize the world underwater so that when we make decisions about fish habitat and about how we're treating our rivers and lakes and coastlines, that we can start to visualize the impacts those decisions are having. And I think that's an important skill. We always think out of sight, out of mind, and we've been going on that principle for a long time, the way we toss stuff into the water. But the things we're tossing in more recently, it's not biodegradable anymore, and they're having lasting impacts.
Yeah, no, and that's, I mean, we can all agree, sustainable food is so important, and, respecting the environment you're in. I mean, if you're enjoying that environment, you want to keep it the way it is, the way you saw it, so that, or even make it better if you, see litter or things like that. It's important to kind of continue to enjoy the space you're in as you or out in the environment, whether it is fishing or if it, like you're saying, just being out on a farm, running around, and we just kind of need to respect where we are on this planet, and the earth will hopefully give us some love back. But like I was saying, we can all agree that sustainable food is so important. The global pandemic has created challenges for many people. We saw the production and distribution supply chains experience delays and shutdowns, contributing to some people experiencing food security issues. In our region of Ontario, more consumers sought out fresh fish from local farms rather than relying on their grocery stores. Do you think that anglers fished more in 2020 to help support a healthy diet? And how does that kind of contribute to food security?
Those are good questions, and we've been monitoring the research that's being done. Carleton University did a survey last year in 2020 of about 1,000 anglers in Ontario and asked that question. That was one of the questions they asked. Did you harvest fish? Was it a food security issue? The Recreational Boaters and Fishing Foundation in the United States also did some surveys because definitely the numbers of people who went fishing in 2020 was way up. I think we set some records on that. Boat sales, fishing license sales, fishing tackle. If you went into any outdoor stores, the pegs where the baits and the hooks they were all emptied out. Everyone was going fishing. It was seen like the perfect solution to the pandemic in terms of social isolating. You could get outdoors, you could socially distance, and really just forget about what was happening on land and just turn your attention to connecting with nature. What a great break for the mental health, the whole One Health side of life. But having said that, people did not abuse of that. And thankfully, government, was there, I think, with the various supports that they put in place. Even people who lost their jobs, and there was a lot, they still had some opportunities for income. So it never came down to having to feed the family, feed the community, find alternative ways of making money. You just have to look at the USSR, what happened when that fell apart in 1991. And people took to fishing in ways that were very much commercial and food security driven. And any body of water that you could access via road was fished out.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I like you were saying, my family, we grew up, my dad's from Northern Ontario. So he, raises very outside camping and, having our favorite lakes and things like that. And, that was one thing we talked about this past summer in 2020 was one of our more memorable summers with camping and stuff like that, because we didn't really have competing priorities. We were able to get out there and enjoy the environment maybe more than we would have. And I mean, we also have my daughter's almost going to be 2 in the spring. So, I mean, she was at the right age where she was more comfortable out on the canoe, which was amazing. But yeah, I remember trying to go get some new water filters and we couldn't get them anywhere, not online, nowhere. Everyone was out camping. And I know a lot of people, even in my own life, that have never been camping before, were, dipping their toes in the water and giving it a chance and a go. And I think that in itself, I mean, I always talked about wanting people to go out and enjoy the environment more because I loved it so much. And then, the pandemic happened. I was like, okay, maybe not as many of you go out and enjoy it. Leave a little bit for me. But no, I think it's been amazing to see what the pandemic has done for people, trying new experiences and getting out there. And this year, for us, fishing wise, personally, we actually didn't keep as many fish as we personally may have in the past. We did way more catch and release because we weren't concerned about, this is the only maybe trip we're going to get for the summer, or this is the only big fishing trip we'll have, for a while. We knew we were going to get way more experience out on the lakes and stuff like that. So we actually, I think we maybe had 1 fish fry in all the trips we did this summer, but the rest we did only catch and release. And I think that for us was, it was the same. We got the same experience out of it, regardless if we kept the fish or not. But I mean, there was no stocking up on any lost lures, that's for sure.
I know it's good. I think the fears that you were going to have a lot of anglers fishing shoulder to shoulder along shorelines, or crowding at boat launches, or people just harvesting fish, filling their limits as much as possible. And I think those fears quickly were set aside. And I mean, there were a lot more people fishing and more garbage. That was a little bit of an issue, but just a lot more people on the water of all sorts, right? I mean, pleasure boaters, tubers, sailors, kayakers, everyone was out. So yeah, there was, it became obvious that we need to be better at keeping the environment clean. There was just a little too much garbage left behind. I think we all need to learn that.
Yeah, definitely taking, take stuff in that you're going to take out with you. And, if you are passing by and you see litter that maybe someone else has, left behind as well, and just, pick it up and bring it out with you, because, it's only going to make it better. It's not going to make things worse. And I I'm sure, a little piece of litter is not going to weigh the canoe down or weigh your boat down any more than it already is with all your gear. So, no, it's been very interesting for me personally to see, the effects of COVID and people enjoying the environment. And it definitely has brought up some serious conversation about sustainability, I think, for a lot of households, because a lot of people haven't really been, I guess, seen it. Like, a lot of people don't really, it's like farming. A lot of people don't actually go onto a farm and, see where their meat comes from. So I think this time has given a lot of people some self-reflection on where their food's coming from and going into the environment where they may have never been before and saying, okay, so these are the lakes, this is where fish come from, and, getting to see almost that full cycle of things. And, it's no longer what you were saying, like out of sight, out of mind. It was insight for a lot of people now to see what's really actually going on out there, which I think is a good experience for most people. And but we'll move on to the next question I have for you. Statistics Canada released recreational angling data based on their most recent survey that was in 2015. And according to this, 3.2 million adult anglers actively participated in a variety of recreational fishing activities in Canada. That's a lot. And that data suggested that anglers caught about 194 million fish of all species. So we're not looking just at one specific species here, but nearly 59 million were kept. They were retained. And that's a huge number. I know we're looking across Canada and we have a lot of body of water, but can you kind of comment on what this kind of means?
That survey, it's, I wish we had better data in terms of retention, because we're talking two different numbers here. We're talking provincial fishing license sales. So a province will sell two types of licenses. They'll sell resident for people who live in the province and non-resident for people who live outside the province. So the non-resident fishers are probably going to be more harvesters because they're going on vacation, they're traveling to a province, they're more sort of interested in maybe keeping some fish, bringing home some fish. So yeah, there's that going on for sure. But it doesn't, those numbers do not capture, say, people over 65. Many provinces do not require someone to have a license if they're over 65 or under 16 or under 18. Many provinces don't capture youth. And then in provinces like Quebec, you can have a family, a nuclear family, one license, and that family can fish under that license. So there's a lot of numbers that aren't being reported. I think the numbers are a lot higher than 3.2 in terms of actual people fishing. And then how often are they going fishing, right? We have no idea about that either. So we have no idea about fishing pressure. Some of those licenses might have been 1 week licenses. Some might have been a season. Some people might have gone once, and some people might have gone every weekend, or who knows. The other data is the amount of fish caught. So that is creel surveys, and those are people that are hired to stand at a boat launch or to go out in a boat with a conservation officer and just basically survey anglers and say, hey, how did the fishing go today? How many did you catch? How long were you out here? What kind of fish did you catch? How many did you keep? And those types of surveys are normally done at popular fishing destinations. But we don't do many of them because a creel survey on a body of water takes about 2 weeks to do a proper survey, and it can cost about $20,000 per survey. So there's not a lot of resources put into doing these types of surveys. They do not go to some of the more remote locations, some of the less popular locations. They're normally conducted on popular fishing lakes. So you would get bodies of water where there's a lot more sort of pressure going on, a lot of more activity, so you're not really catching the real essence of what's truly going on in the fishing world, right? They just take that and they say, okay, for this region, this is the kind of fishing pressure we're estimating. But then they're also going out at peak times, July, August, maybe June. It's not taking into consideration the whole year when the weather goes bad, when colder, less people going fishing. So you can't really project that this is happening over 2 weeks in July. This is what it's going to be like the whole season, when it's not. I mean, there's going to be less people fishing in the shoulder seasons, right? Spring and fall. So it's not an exact science at all.
Yeah. I mean, if you The two I'm most familiar with when we're talking about creel is Harkness. So the MNR has the Harkness program that's out of Algonquin. They do creel on Opeongo. So that's the mainstream big lake that people kind of taxi away into the other parts of the lake, but they mostly focus on the people that, are standing on shore and that are, going out for the day on Opeongo and coming back. And another one I'm kind of familiar with is with the MNR as well. I used to work for the MNR doing the broad scale monitoring program. And part of that is we worked with the North Bay District and we did some creel. I got to do 1 week's worth of creel in the end of the summer on Lake Nipissing. And that lake is obviously, there's some concern with, they wanted to look at the walleye population and make sure it kind of stays sustainable and stuff like that. But kind of the same thing, like they do, the district does creel on Nipissing year round. So they do the winters and the summers as well. But what you're saying is it takes a lot of resources to do those type of surveys. And as much as they are so important because it's the general public, it takes a lot to do a season like that. I mean, it's going to take a boat and gas, and then you got to have people going on those boats and going around and meeting people. And Lake Nipissing is not a small lake. There's lots of avenues and bays that you have to go into. So there's a schedule and that they follow and things like that. And I think what you're saying is people not going, there's not those surveys happening in lakes that are kind of more remote because obviously there's not as many people going there. So this is a way that they're able to target as many people as possible in one kind of lake, but it's not accurate. It's not as accurate as it should be. And that kind of leads into kind of my next question is, instead of relying on these survey results, do you think that fisheries management might someday adopt an electronic reporting system which can be utilized by anglers? So like scientists can monitor like fishing pressure at a local level, kind of in real time.
Yeah, we're talking fishing apps are getting quite popular. And I've been doing a lot of research on this over the last 4 or 5 years, talking to developers of various apps. And they're not cheap. Like an app to go on your phone, a basic app to capture this type of data can cost easily $100,000 to create. And then you got to say, what's the purpose? Because there's many types of customers for these types of apps. So some of them are being made for people who are having fishing tournaments. So you can catch, sort of record and release the fish in real time and have it reported directly back to the tournament organizers and the other competitors. And we're seeing this with Major League Fishing. It's getting quite popular. Other lakes where you're not allowed to have retention, it's catch and release only. You're not allowed to transport the fish around. So catch, photograph, release type of tournaments and using these apps is starting to grow. The National Professional Anglers Association just endorsed an app for this type of purpose. The other reason apps are popular is for bragging and for documenting your own fishing logs, right? And that this is a way, hey, look at the fish I caught. You're sharing it within your community of anglers, a bit of a bragging going on. And you're also tracking, where did I catch this fish? What did I catch it on? So when you go back, you can think, okay, this worked under these conditions. I'm going to try it again. I'm going to go to these same locations. So there's a level of two levels of information there. There's the information you want to share, which is, normally the picture of the fish. And then there's the information you don't want to share is where you caught that fish and what you caught it on, the personal, private kind of stuff that you really, anglers just don't want to give away. And that's the problem when it comes to, one of the problems anyways, when it comes to using these apps for fisheries management is anglers can expand their story a little bit and they don't want to give away their location. So they're not reporting accurately necessarily using these apps. And they're also not reporting the hours spent on a body of water where they're not catching anything. Fishing pressure, fishing effort is super important to record. So you need to know, that angler spent 3 days to catch that one muskie. It didn't just happen in that moment. There was a lot of effort put in. And if that level of effort goes up every year, this year's 3, next year's 4 days, and the year after that it's 5, there's something going wrong with the fishery, right? And that's a good indication is fishing effort. So there is a bunch of issues around privacy, applicability, and but what we're finding, like in Canada, we have the My Catch app developed by Anglers Atlas out on the west coast there, and that's becoming popular amongst researchers. So you'll have a researcher who wants to do some research on a specific body of water, maybe a specific species of fish, and it's going to happen over a month or 2-month period. So they'll contact local anglers, identify local anglers over social media, get them to download the app and say, okay, for the next 2 months, every time you go on this body of water, I want you to record faithfully because we need to know what's going on in this lake. We need to know what's happening to the fish. And anglers will rise to that occasion. Absolutely. It's been shown that they will participate in that type of research as long as they have a guarantee that the scientists will not release the information about where those fish were caught and give away those locations or post those, make those publicly. The last thing you want is your personal fishing hole to be turned into a community fishing hole. So the researchers are definitely aware of that, and they do safeguard that information. The only problem with that type of research we're finding is that it's good in a short term, but over a longer period of time, angler interest in providing that kind of data sort of falls off. And we saw that on the Fraser River when we started the lower Fraser River sturgeon tracking exercise, where a bunch of fishing guides were given equipment to tag the sturgeon being caught. And they did that quite effectively for the first year or two. Every sturgeon that was brought into the boat was measured, photographed, tagged, scanned for a tag. All that information was recorded. The fish were released. And then after several years, they got a little lazy, and they only were then bringing the bigger sturgeon on board. And the smaller ones, the juvenile sturgeon, were quite often released in the water. They weren't even brought out of the water. They were just released in the water, no tagging, no scanning of tags. So then after about 5 years, the researchers became quite alarmed. They said, wow, there's no more juvenile sturgeon in the Fraser River. There's only adults left based on this data. Well, they weren't out there watching what the data collectors were doing. And so you really have to pay attention, and you really have to be communicating with your citizen scientists on a regular basis if you're going to use this. And I guess the last thing I'd say about these types of apps is that if you're only getting data from 2 or 3 anglers on a body of water, and one is being faithful about recording the data, and the other one's only recording the big fish they're catching, the other one's maybe making up some stories about how good the fishing was that day and they caught 100. The data ranges in such wide degrees. All the data is outliers. You don't have a sort of a medium that sort of where you can say, okay, here's the medium. These are the reports. We've got 100 reports that are all sort of giving the same type of information, and 2 or 3 that are just way out there that we'll discard. So you need to have a lot of data sources to really have reliable data. And for that reason, it hasn't been incorporated by fishery managers yet.
Yeah, sorry, I'm stuttering here. But yeah, like what you're exactly saying is, it's a typical, okay, I'm going to throw my dad under the bus here. My dad is a great fisherman. We have some good family competitions. It's always great to outfish my dad. But it's the story, the fish gets bigger and bigger and bigger every time he tells the story, even though it was a beautiful fish the first time. And the saying, oh yeah, we were out on Zipper Lake, and you don't give that name, you don't give the information. And I know a lot of people that I've met over the past couple of years through school and stuff like that. The people that are fishing, yeah, they don't share where they got that beautiful fish. They don't want people jumping on their territory, as a lot of people say, well, it's my lake, even though, it's not theirs. And one kind of question I had kind of as you were talking about this, so I don't know, anyone who's kind of familiar with hunting. So I grew up in a family that hunts. We still participate, and the MNR's made this transition into, so if you take a deer tag, let's say, you have so long to report that tag. And whether you even, did you kill a deer? Did you harvest a deer? Did you not harvest a deer? But how many deer did you see in this hunting season? So even if you maybe not, harvested a deer, how many does did you see? How many bucks did you see? What zones were you hunting in? And it's more privately done. So I think, it's something they've kind of forced, I don't want to use the word force, but it's kind of putting people in a place where, you can enjoy what you still do, but in the end, they want us to be responsible with recording what we're doing and being able to take some data from that. So, for instance, if you're looking at my family, we specifically hunt in 2 different types of zones, one in more southern Ontario and one more northern Ontario. And then, one of us in my whole family was able to harvest a deer, but, I only saw 1 buck. But my dad saw 7 does and 3 bucks. And, my partner, he saw, lots of different deer because he was hunting in 2 different hunting zones. So the government's kind of created people this space where they need to record what they're doing. Do you think that's something people they could do with fishing license? So you take a fishing license out and, you have to report back. It is tricky because how honest are people going to be with fishing? It's a lot more complex and a bit harder, but
I think there's going to be some opportunities there for sure. Some of the more larger apex predator type fish, some of the rarer fish like perhaps muskellunge on a body of water, you could implement that as a research type of collection similar to what you're talking about with the deer. Where you're only catching one of these fish every 2 or 3 days, and so it's not a hardship to put on the angler or even the guide. I mean, that's something guides could be asked to do as well as part of their guiding license responsibilities, is to track how many fish were caught aboard their boat by customers and how long did it take. And guides can be more accurate. I mean, you see these on head boats, along the coast, that they have to track that sort of data. So it's not unheard of. It absolutely could be done. Other areas could be, a lake association where you have 200 cottages on a lake, and some of the cottagers are saying, "Oh, there's so many fish out there. I'm taking my 5 every weekend, and then we're having fish fry every Saturday night." And others are saying, "There's not enough fish. No one should be catching anything." And people's perception of the availability and the number of fish left in the lake can be quite widespread. So if you have research about your habitat, about the lake, and how many fish it probably holds, and you can quantify how many fish are being caught and harvested every year and say, okay, well, we've reached our limit for this year. Let's just go to catch and release now. And it can give people a sense of confidence that they're fishing sustainably now, that they're not overdoing it or they're not being overly protective. So I think there's going to be opportunities on many different levels, both privately, publicly, from a guiding perspective. People who just want to make sure that their body of water, that their fishing is good, that it's being managed, and that the people who are calling those shots in terms of setting limits and catch limits and size limits and seasons when they open and close, that they have the best information possible. I think it's coming.
Yeah, I think if there are these tools that become more popular and more available to the public, I think a lot of people who say consistently go to one lake, so say you have a cottage on a lake and that's the only place you fish, I think people can become more aware of what they're doing. I'm going to talk on a personal experience here. I was up in near Cochrane, Ontario, and I was at a lake, and this guy was going on about how there's so many pike in his lake now. Like, there's so many pike and the walleye population is depleting, and he's like, what's going on? He wants to know. And I asked him a simple question. I said, what species do you target personally here on this lake? And he said, well, walleye. And I said, do you harvest the walleye you catch? He goes, oh yes, love fresh walleye. And I said, do you catch any pike? And he said, yeah, but I don't like pike. I just throw it back into the water. And I said, I said, I think that's a question you should ask yourself more on your own lake. You know, what effect are you personally having on your own lake? Are you contributing to what's happening with the population in the lake? Now, that's a very generic question here. I'm not suggesting anything hardcore, but I think
you hear that. You hear that. Yeah, you do hear that. You know, people say, man, the fish were here for, 2 weeks ago. There was a school of fish here, and man, we were taking our limit every day, and then they moved off. And I said, well, did they move off, or you just caught them all? You know, like, come on, hello. You know, it's not an infinite supply.
Yeah, and I mean, like our family as well. We go to one lake once a year. It's kind of a family lake. But same thing, we don't go out and we're not like harvesting like max catch every time, because that's a lake. My great grandfather took my dad, and my dad has taken me since I was 9 months old, and I got to take my daughter for the first time at 2 months old, and I want that there to be there still for her. So I think it's up to us to be responsible for what we're doing in those lakes. And I think having some tools that you can input your data and kind of see real time the effects that you're having on a lake, I think it might make people more cautious and, think twice about what they're doing daily or yearly or monthly, even depending on how they fish at a body of water. So.
Yeah. I think knowledge is good. And, recreational fishing compared to commercial fisheries, right? Our commercial fisheries, when a boat comes back into the dock and unloads, we know exactly how many fish were caught on that boat. And, we have observers on these boats too, we track their bycatch, make sure no one's cheating. Cameras now, remote video cameras are being installed on commercial fishing boats. So, it's not impossible. We're doing a much better job in terms of managing the harvest on fishing stocks and specific regions at different times of the year, and we're tracking all that. When you issue a recreational fishing license and it's good for the province, and you can go anywhere in that province and fill your limit off any body of water on any day and do it as many times as you want, as long as you don't, load up your freezer. It's all about how many you're allowed to retain. But if you're eating them and giving them away, you can continue to do that every day. We have no idea if you did it once a year or if you did it, 200 times a year. We have no idea.
And I think too, like I'm going to bring in some aquaculture here, but we have such a good opportunity right now. There's a lot of sustainable aquaculture facilities, which is agriculture of, growing fish on land or in the environment. And I think if you love fishing, there is other sustainable alternatives of, filling that freezer full of fish, that it doesn't have to always come from the natural environment, that, you can get a supply of sustainable seafood at your grocery store, some local farms if you're nearby. Distributors. I know I have a family member that's a distributor, and there's a local farm near here called Spring Hills. They're doing deliveries of boxes of fish fillets, and so I think there's a blend of being able to still fish as someone and a family member who fishes and loves camping. I don't fill my freezer with wild stock fish as much now. I definitely still enjoy a little bit of wild caught when I go camping, maybe once a summer. But right now, majority, I'm in a different situation. I work on a fish farm, but we're definitely looking at other sources of seafood that is not necessarily consistently wild stock. So
you see that even with some of the outfitters now, some of the fishing lodges, people go up, they spend a lot of money, they to be guided out there and fish, and a big part of that is the shore lunch. So if you think you've got a bunch of guides going out every day with the clientele and every one of them wants a shore lunch, that's a lot of harvesting happening every day throughout the season. Some of these lodges are doing now is saying, you know what, even if you can't catch a fish, good day or bad day, you're eating lunch, and they bring with them some aquaculture fish, right, or some sustainably harvested fish that they purchase and they put in the boat in a cooler, and then at lunchtime, it doesn't matter what you caught. You don't need that pressure of having to catch lunch. And a lot of the guides feel the pressure is taken off them, and a lot of the clientele enjoy that too. They say, I don't have to feel bad if I'm, that pressure that noon is coming and I haven't caught the right size or the right species fish, or we're going to have to kill this big one because everyone's hungry and we're running out of time. That's all gone. You can catch whatever fish you want, let it go to the shore, have your shore lunch.
No, and that's a good point. I mean, there's lots of you can go to lots of lakes in Ontario, and there's a lodge on them, and sometimes there's 2 lodges, and so there is a lot of pressure. And I think it is interesting. I know we've adjusted over time as a family, and I mean, we just did the French this summer, and we didn't catch it. I mean, we caught fish, but we didn't keep a single fish. And in the end of the day, I was like, we have so much food in our coolers. We don't need the fish to get us through. I mean, for us, it was like, yeah, if we have emptied the cooler and, we need to eat to kind of get us through till we get back to shore, yeah, maybe. But like, majority of us bring way too much food with us when we head into the bush. So the experience for me anyways is still exhilarating, catching that fish and, trying to get the biggest one and, trying all your lures and trying all these different things. But in the end of the day, like, landing the fish is the thrill, not necessarily eating the fish that you've caught, unless, that's something that you feel is like super important and is part of, say, a belief or a culture and things like that, because I know that does play a big role. But I mean, even us on the French, I think there was like a day where we didn't even fish because we were just paddling, and we just were so tired that we just had a fire and just went to bed early. But,
you know what? It's great to hear millennials and Gen Zs, and it's now about the experience, right? It's not about let's get out there and catch our limit of fish. And that wasn't that long ago, right? That was the mode, that was the goal, and people didn't really understand that you could fish out a lake. We didn't have that knowledge. We never had that experience. It wasn't in our lexicon, and now we know that with the technology and what we know through science, that it is totally we can put a lot of pressure on a body of water and put at risk the fish stocks in that water and cause it to go down quite a lot. So I think, the younger population, it's what you're talking about exactly. It's having that experience of just going into nature, having the whole planning, the preparation, the travel, the experience of camping, of being on the water, all of that, the campfire, having a fish, holding it in your hand, connecting with that fish is a symbolic thing now. It's to know, hey, this is a native fish caught that's been here, for thousands of years. This is a species that's native to this lake. You don't need to put in smallmouth bass or rainbow trout so that I can catch a lot of fish in this lake. You want to catch a native fish from that body of water. It's all part of that authentic outdoor experience.
Yeah, and I think too, for myself, like I feel more empowered that I'm able to return that fish back into its environment, to keep growing and to keep getting bigger, so that the next person coming may have that same ability as me, where if I were to keep every fish I caught, that has a slow but very impactful effect on the environment. And it's I think there's a good place for both, catch and release and angling and that experience with nature, but also blending it with, sustainable aquaculture and sustainable harvesting of wild stocks. And, having that those two kind of come together can make a really good pair in making sure that there's going to be these experiences for futures to come, for generations to come. And, you were talking about millennials and Gen Zs. Like, I know even listening to my dad tell stories about, him going to these lakes with his great grandfather and they coming back with like bags of fish because it didn't matter back then.
Yeah.
And he talks about the size of these brook trout, the brook char that they caught. And you don't see that, at that lake anymore because, that was a very impactful thing that was happening before I was around. So I think for us personally, I want to maintain that lake for futures to come because it is, Zipper Lake. It's one of my favorite lakes that I don't tend to share with many people because I want that lake to stay plentiful and to supply some beautiful fish for futures to come. So, but that's all I have today for you. Like, those are all the questions. I don't know if you have anything else you want to share before we kind of sign off.
We do a podcast every 2 weeks called the Bluefish Radio Show. We're interviewing scientists and champions who are making an effort to make sure the recreational fishery in their area in Canada is doing well, identifying issues, rallying the troops, to deal with those issues and celebrating the act of fishing, recreational fishing, the Bluefish Radio Show. And we're doing a newsletter every 2 weeks as well around recreational fishing about the fish, the fishing, and the water, and things you might want to be on top of. So all that information can be found at our website, bluefishcanada.ca, bluefishcanada.ca.
I will link all of those avenues for people. If you're watching this, you can just head down to the description and be directed to these. I personally have been listening to the Bluefish Radio for a year and a half now, and there's some really great information out there to get yourself more knowledge. Like we've heard, knowledge is power. So the more you learn about your environment and what's going on in angling or aquaculture, Bluefish Radio gives you that easy, accessible tools to learn more about what's going on near you. So I want to thank you, Lawrence, for joining me today and sharing a little tidbit of what your work is doing for sustainable fishing practices. If you want to know more about Lawrence and his work, you can follow him at his Bluefish Radio like we heard, and all those links are down below that you can follow. So thank you.
Well, thank you, and thanks for doing what you're doing. It's fascinating the way you're stitching all these ideas about, seafood, aquaculture and commercial and recreational. I think it's nice to be able to draw some parallels and identify the differences between all of that. It's cool.
Yeah, it's the same. We all have the same end goal: sustainability and maintaining what's there. And I think I want to be able to show people that it's not just aquaculture, it's everybody that is part of sustainable fisheries. It's all of us coming together and working together as a team so that can happen and that can be possible.
Very cool.
Hey guys, I hope you liked the video today. If you did, please swim on over and hit the like button and subscribe. Comment below if you have any questions you want answered in any of our future videos. Hope to see you next time.